My dear sisters and brothers, of the many parables that the Lord taught his disciples and you and me, today seemingly is one of the easiest to understand in this depiction of the three servants and how they were blessed with talents for the purpose of sharing them for those around them, their neighbors, and those most in need. And the expectation is that is why the gifts were given in the first place, not for our own purpose, but for the giving to others. And as was true for them, it would be true for us as well. And it seems that it's a moment of grace on this day of the poor. This is the World Day for the Poor, that it can give us great pause to reflect on how we use our gifts and talents for the benefit of those who are in need. Now, my friends, I presume that all of us in this church, because we strive to be faithful to the Lord, that we are in fact trying our best to do just that. I am, after all, preaching to the choir. We're all attempting in our own ways to give back to our neighbors and friends. So this lesson should not be a surprise to any of us. But have not at one time or another in your life, have you not asked yourself the question, when is enough enough? Like, at what point can I say I have fulfilled the mandate of the Lord? How many of my gifts and talents, and to what extent the things I have, how much do I have to share in order to be in right relationship with the Lord? Now, perhaps I'm the only one who asked that question, but I have asked it of myself at one time or another. My suspicion is, so have you. And there is an answer to that question, and it is in the parable itself. And if you and I can take ourselves out of our modern English-speaking world and enter into the world of Jesus, we may have the answer to that question. For when you hear the word talent, my suspicion is you do what I do. Understand it as the English word, talent. And we understand it to be the gifts and abilities and the possessions and the benefits that God has given us that we share. And on some level, that is true. But for the listener in Jesus' time, the word talent meant something very specific. It was a measure of weight. It meant 80 pounds. Most often, 80 pounds of silver. Now, even in our modern world, if someone gave you 400 pounds of silver, that's nothing to sneeze at, right? We're talking a significant amount of money. But in the time of Jesus, it was astonishing. For 80 pounds of silver equaled 6,000 denarii. That is the measure of currency similar to what we would consider a dollar. And in the time of Jesus, one day's work paid 1 denarii. So one talent was 20 years of someone's salary given as a gift. 2 talents, 40 years. 5 talents was 100 years of your salary given to you by God. Could you imagine if someone offered you 100 years of your salary? What would cross your mind? What would you do with all that money? See, and that's the point. See, because the giver is our Father in heaven, and his generosity is beyond comprehension. It's beyond astonishing. It's beyond anything we could earn or merit. It is beyond anything that measures the relationships you and I have with one another. It is simply astonishing. And that level of, I may say, reckless generosity demands a response. And what Jesus is asking of us is to imitate the recklessness. Or to put it another way, there is never a point where we can say enough is enough if there is even one more step you and I can do or take. In the life of discipleship, there will be different times in our lives when we can be in response to the needs of our neighbors and friends, the poor and those around us, to be able to respond. They change with the seasons of our lives. In which case that question, how much is enough, is asked of us not once, but is asked over and over again in our lives. And the answer changes depending on the circumstances in which we find ourselves. It's part of the fabric of the examination of conscience you and I do each day. But we must remember that it is against the backdrop of a God who is so wildly generous that if we were to ask him, what is enough for you, Almighty God? His answer is simple. Look upon the answer of the generosity of the living God. And so I ask you, my friends, as we pass this week, as we reflect on this grand lesson the Lord gives us, here and now, how would you and I answer the question, what is enough for me to give?